On the contrary, and it was this which did so much to make my war good, I was transplanted in an intact family from one reassuring fireside to another, with nothing but the excitement of the journey and new surroundings to mark the change. It was the evacuation program, nonetheless, which took me to the West Country, for my father's war work was to help administer it. An inspector of schools, he had in the years before the war supervised teaching in one of the most densely populated districts of South London, deemed by the government after the scare of Munich to be one of the likeliest targets for German air attack. Its schools had therefore been among the first directed to disperse their pupils to the countryside, and for the first week of the war he had shuffled manila-labelled children, teachers, burst suitcases and mislaid gas masks between the platforms of Paddington Station and seen them off westward to their billeting areas. At the end of it he followed the last train he had filled, too exhausted to be moved by the pathos of this extraordinary diaspora, to rejoin his wife and family, sent ahead to set up temporary home on the outskirts of the country town where he was to have his office. For the rest of the autumn we saw little of him. His days were taken with settling schools, half-schools, fractions of schools, into church halls and village institutes, the length of the Quantocks and Mendips, and coaxing children and teachers back into the routine of the timetable. Meanwhile, my mother, losing patience with the gimcrack villa to which long-distance arrangements had brought us, found a pretty white Regency cottage in the fields beyond the town, into which she settled her 3 children and their nursemaid, a kindly middle-aged soul in an advanced but harmless stage of religious mania, for the winter. By Christmas my father's daily round had slowed to the pace of our own, and there, for the next 5 years, our share of the war stopped. Petrol rationing had already brought silence to the high road which ran beyond our front garden wall, broken only by the buzz of the infrequent rural bus, the roar of a very rare tractor passing from one field to another, and the clatter of hoofs of ponies seeking to escape the whip hand of an intimidating breed of leather-faced landed ladies whom the war had put back into governess carts long cobwebbed and forgotten. My father, categorized as an essential user, retained his car and set off each morning exactly as he had done days without number in London before the war, to call on headmasters and headmistresses, monitor standards of reading among 8-year-olds, cast an eye on probationary teachers, discuss leaving certificates with their seniors, and in general uphold the austere but uplifting ideal of standard and compulsory education for all, which inspectors of schools had represented since Matthew Arnold's appointment to the first inspectorship 100 years before. I often accompanied him, my private school holidays overlapping the terms of the state schools in his care, an anomaly to which at the age of 6 or 7 I gave no thought at all. Thus I began my discovery of the secret world of the English countryside, in 1940 literally secret, for among the flurry of anti-invasion directives issued after the fall of France was one ordering the uprooting of all rural signposts. Whatever twist that measure might have given to the wanderings of vagabond German parachutists, it had the effect of taking the 2 of us down every other wrong turning which offered itself. These false starts were corrected only by random knocking at the doors of remote cottages, inevitably occupied by crones, who regarded all strangers as foreigners, and so to be denied any but the most misleading information, or by shouted conversations with ploughmen following their horses in the middle distance of fields too muddy to enter. Staple Fitzpaine, Curry Revell, Curry Mallet, Isle Abbots, Isle Brewers, Hatch Beecham, Thorn Falcon, Buckland St. Mary, Coombe St. Nicholas, How slowly and circuitously did my father's car learn to pick its way from one hidden place to another through a countryside as silent and empty as it had been before the coming of the railways. As I grew a little and learnt to bicycle, these expeditions became my own, no doubt of short range, but in memory of immense extent, excitement, and mystery. The war having taken the young men from the farms and forced their employers to concentrate on essentials, hedges and roadside trees grew unchecked from one springtime to the next, turning every lane in summer into a green tunnel waist-deep at the verge with campion and cow-parsley, and trellised overhead at harvest with the yellow of corn-stalks scraped from the tops of wagons bringing grain to the threshing machines. Nearby, the tunnels led to farms from where eggs, pots of cream, and sometimes an unplucked chicken found their way, in the teeth of all rationing regulations, onto neighbours' tables, our own included. Farms where there were ricks to be scaled, pigs poked, rats chased, cats followed to their litters of kittens in high, hot, dusty haylofts, and sheds filled with obsolete horse-drawn machinery to be examined with much squeaking of rusty levers and squealing of long-frozen gears. Farther away, the tunnels led to stranger destinations, to secret lakes in overgrown woods where swans rose screaming from their nests, with a flap of wings which we children believed, with the force of gospel truth, could break a man's arm at a single blow. To small waterfalls, tinkling bright in the gloom of stream-cut grottos under bridges at the turn of an oak-hung road. To short-tufted upland sheep-runs, where we improvised picnics in the wheeled, hump-backed sheds in which shepherds land their ewes. To an isolated crossroad forge, dark as midnight within, even at high summer, and pungent with the smoke of hooves burning under red-hot iron. I was seeing the last days, know it though I could not, of 1,000 years of heavy horse farming. In summer, the horses came to the fields behind our house, and we rode beside their drivers on machines seemingly no different from the cast-offs discovered in our exploration of the neighbouring outhouses, waiting for the word to lift the blades on the turn and leave the long swathe of mown grass to lie like a broken wave on the stubble behind. A day or two of sun took us out again with pitchforks to turn the drying crop, and then, mounted behind a horse-rake, to gather the drift into lines, watch it pitched onto wagons, and last of all, brought to the stacks for thatching against the storms of winter. And yet I remember no wartime winter. The German 6th Army froze in its filthy iron-hard foxholes at Stalingrad. I pined for snow on a bright Christmas Eve, and thought myself cheated when the morrow brought not a flake. The PQ convoys skirted the edge of the pack on the North Russia run, shrinking by every mile of sea room they could find from the basilisk eye of the Luftwaffe. I scouted the hedge bottoms for a ditchful of bearing ice, and came home with wet socks. The hunger winter of 1944 sent Dutch families to scratch for overlooked potatoes in the twice-dug earth of North Holland. I cracked hazelnuts in the November sun on Sunday afternoon walks with my father, and returned to hot treacle flapjack by the kitchen fire. Perhaps there were other corners of war-enwrapped Europe where children lived as well-fed, warm, and carefree as us. But I wonder if any retain, as I do, a memory of 6 years so consistently illuminated by sunlight, so deeply suffused by happiness, so utterly unmenaced by danger. Today, conscience attacks memory with accusations of involuntary guilt at what I was spared, but at the time it was simply as if the war was not. Chance decreed that I had no close relatives of an age to serve in the armed forces, nor, apparently, had any of the families who lived round about. our nearest neighbour with military connections,